Hello, I'm James Foley. I'm a children's author and illustrator, and I live and work in Walyalup, Fremantle. And right here, I'm sitting in my studio out the back of Paperbird Books. You may know my picture book Stellarphant, my graphic novel series Secret Agent Mole, my S.Tinker graphic novels Brobot, Gastronauts, Dungzilla and Chickensaurus, or my picture book Happy Barry Capybara. Today I'm going to show you how to teach comics in your classroom. Now, don't worry, you don't have to be a good drawer to make comics, even to teach comics. The success of a comic is not measured by how well it's drawn, but by how successfully it communicates an idea. It does not matter if you do that with stick figures or with cartoony drawings like I do, or with photorealistic, beautiful artwork. All that matters is how you communicate the idea, and if you can get it across to somebody else, then that is a successful comic. Now, when kids start making their own comics, there's a couple of issues that they always come into. One is that they get straight into final artwork with no forward planning. This means that they fall into plot holes, they can leave sections of their story out because they had it in their head, but they didn't realize the reader actually needs to have that information on the page too. They can just go ahead and make dozens and dozens and dozens of tiny panels on a page, and then their words in the pictures are not very big and you can't really tell what's going on. And usually they'll draw the pictures first and not the words, and then they'll run out of space for the words. So these are strategies that I use when I'm running workshops in the classroom. I usually start off with character design, because once kids have their own character that they care about, then the rest of the storytelling process is quite straightforward. You've got them to buy into it, and then they're motivated to continue. It's a lot of fun also if you start with villains, because villains are more fun to write as characters, and kids often are like, oh cool, this is great, I can make this nasty little character. And then it's easy to figure out who a hero could be to oppose that villain. It's important though to give some sort of creative limitations. Don't just say make up a character, have some sort of sandbox for them to play in. So say your character has to be an animal secret agent, or your character has to be based on a piece of food you would find in the fridge. That way their brief is defined and it's relating to things that they already know. Character profile sheets are very useful as well. So you can have a sketch of your character, give your character a name, strengths, and weaknesses. If kids get stuck on any one of these, just ask them to move on to the next one. They can always come back and figure out the name later. The most important thing you need to know about your character is not actually their strengths or their weaknesses, it's what does the character want? And you might talk to your students already about this in terms of motivation, but I find it's much simpler to understand if you just ask the question, what does my character want most in the world? It could be something really low stakes, like they want to find their lost hat. Or it could be something really huge, like they want to take over the universe. Whatever it is, it's got to be the driving force behind that character. And if you know what the character wants, then making a story is really, really straightforward after that. Because all you have to do is have your character try to get what they want, and you just make it really hard for them. You can't let them get what they want straight away, because then it's a really boring story. Often the rule of 3 is really useful. Your character tries 3 times to get something, and each time they fail, but then eventually they figure out a way to do it, and it's a really nice, satisfying ending in that way. In terms of actually planning out that story, I actually write a script. I write it like a film or like a play, so I just write out the dialogue that the characters are saying to each other or themselves, and I write out descriptions of the action. So this is a page of the script from Secret Agent Mole Book 1. You can see that I literally just start off with Chapter 1, Mole on a Mission. I'm writing down little bits of caption here. So this is going to be a caption box, just talking about the setting, and then I describe what I'm going to draw. A foreboding mountain in the shape of a skull. In the foreground, a sign saying, "Keep out, private supervillain lair, no junk mail." Then we zoom in, Mole Hill. It's an eye socket of the skull. Wait, no, it's a cave. It's a window of a secret villain lair. A molehill has appeared in the ground. And then the caption says, Mole, Max Mole. A head pops out of the molehill. It's our hero, Max Mole. He leaps out of the hole with a somersault and lands with his suction cup gun out at the ready. He looks side to side, checking for danger. So I'm just describing what I'm going to show so far, but then some dialogue. Max says into an earpiece, "All clear." A small molehill opening bursts open to reveal a hippo. Helena says, "You could have dug the tunnel a bit wider, Max. I'm a little larger than you." "Sorry, Helena, I didn't think. I'm too excited. Our very first mission. I've dreamed of this since I was a baby mole." Max grabs an earthworm from the molehill dirt and slurps it up. So I'm literally just writing down captions, descriptions of what I'm going to show, descriptions of action, and what the characters are going to say. And I'll write the entire story out this way. This particular story was about 28 pages long, and it was 5,700 words, which then translated into a 200-page comic in the end. So yeah, it can be a lot of work, but it's very, very important, because if I know exactly how many words my characters need to say, then I know exactly how much space I need to leave for that in the panel. And just out of interest, this is how that comic script got translated into pages of the finished comic. Another really important foundational skill for comics is making speech bubbles. So let's have a look at how we do that now. Speech bubbles are how we get characters to talk, yeah? Okay, here we have a character. Now, often kids will do this. Okay, they'll draw the speech bubble first and then put the words into it, and it just means that you run out of space. It's really important that we write the words first. There we go. Now, also the part of the speech bubble that points back to the character's mouth, this part here, it's called the tail. A tail points to the mouth. It doesn't go all the way into the mouth, because then it ends up looking like an actual object that the character is chomping onto with their mouth. It goes about halfway, and it just points over in that direction. Ideally too, if we were inside a panel at this point, I would actually write the words before I even did the drawing, because then I know that I've got enough space for those words within the panel. We'll talk more about that in a bit. Okay, let's have a look at when we have conversations between two characters in one panel. Again, ideally I would have put the words in first before I had the characters in there, but just for argument's sake, I'll put the characters in first. Often a little mistake that kids will come up against, so they might have a character on the right hand side talking first, like so. And obviously in English, we read and we write from left to right. So this is in the wrong spot. If you want your character on the right hand side to speak first, there's an easy, quick little way around it. Because in English we read from left to right, but we also read from top to bottom, we can have the character on the right have their speech bubble above, and then the other character can have their speech bubble underneath. Too easy. Sometimes you want to have characters talk where you have multiple speech bubbles for each character within the one panel. In those cases, it's really important to plan out your words ahead of time, and we can connect the little speech bubbles up one at a time. In this case, we want to have a nice sort of zigzag pattern between our speech bubbles, and we can connect up two speech bubbles from the same character in the one panel with one of these little connectors. What you don't want to do is have two separate tails for two separate bubbles like that. That is going to get too confusing for readers. It's not going to work. So we use these little connectors instead. And just briefly, this isn't a speech bubble, but it's a thought bubble, and kids will pretty much understand this. We have a trail of bubbles going back not to the character's mouth, but towards the character's brain, which is where the thought bubble is coming from. If you have the thought bubbles going to the character's mouth, then it will look like they are burping out the gas. But you could also, if you wanted to, use a thought bubble that actually emanates from a character's stomach. And that could be a fun little way of making it so that the stomach is doing the thinking. One other thing too that's really useful is the caption box. So the caption box is basically like narration. Very, very simple to do. Chuck them up in the corner, put them in their own box. Bob's your uncle. So how do we get past this thing of kids making dozens and dozens and dozens of tiny panels on their pages? Simple, we'll give them a template. We're going to limit the number of panels that they have per page. It's really, really easy to use A4 or A3 plain white paper. If you're using A4, then I would suggest no more than 4 panels per page. Give them a template to work from so that they ensure that their panels are nice and big and there's plenty of space for their words and their pictures in each one. If you're doing A3 pages, then just double it, make it 8 instead. But yeah, just make yourself up a really quick template, photocopy it, give it to the kids, then you're laughing. Now when I'm making comics, I use a lot of drafts. I will either do tiny little thumbnail sketches that show me the layout for where the characters and the words are going to go on every panel, on every page in the entire book before I start doing full-size drawings. Or lately, to save time, I've been going straight into doing digital drafts, laying out the panels, laying out the words first, and then doing very quick rough sketches so that I can plan out the action. Once it's good to go, I can then trace over the top to make my final art. Now, unfortunately, kids don't often have the patience for this, and you might not even have the time in a classroom to go through all of this. Kids are just really itching to get on with their final artwork. But if you ask them to just get on with it, then you find that quite often they're going to get straight onto drawing their art. They're not going to leave room for the words in the panels. There's going to be these issues coming up. So this approach tends to work well in the classroom. If you have your templates and you have the kids working on their scripts, you take all the dialogue from the scripts and you start transferring it into the template and do the entire story, just the dialogue, laying it out where it would go. This gives you a chance to see the entire story and check that it all makes sense just with the words. If there's anything missing, then you can check at this stage before you start doing any drawings at all. You can check the pacing as well. You can see if maybe it needs a little bit of a breather here, a little silent panel where we can just show a location or a reaction from a character before we move on with more dialogue. It's much easier to draft out the story this way first with just the words, because if something's not working, then you can rewrite it and you can rearrange it just by adding different words. It's much harder to redraw entire panels. All right, awesome. I hope all of these little tips help you when you're making comics in the classroom. You can check out my comics at your local bookshop, maybe even in your school library. Thanks so much for having me and good luck. Happy making comics.